Welcome to First. This week, we can say I'm Nichelle Poston along with Mark Eichman and Shirley Min. Pope Francis is just over 3 weeks away from his Philadelphia visit. Delaware Catholics are getting ready for his arrival as well. We'll cover it all on First this week.
PBS is getting ready to re-air the landmark Ken Burns Civil War series. Delaware's role in that war is part of our history lesson this week on First.
And watercolors take on a whole new meaning in Dover at the Biggs Museum. Learn more about the group behind the paintings and see their work in our First experience. First, your public media news magazine starts now.
Pope Francis is headed to the United States in a couple weeks. You may think his visit is just a Philadelphia story, but there are many Delaware connections. We'll talk in a few minutes with our content partner, Delaware Today, and a conversation Kevin Noonan had with Wilmington Bishop Francis Malooly. But we'll start with our first look and some of the people connected with the World Meeting of Families. A recent Gallup poll shows that Pope Francis' approval rating has taken a slight decline among Americans. The drop in part is reportedly due to his recent views on climate change, but it's his willingness to tackle taboo topics like global warming that make him so appealing to some Catholics and other people of faith.
I feel that he's bringing us more into today's world.
Mary Catherine McTaggart and Margie Plasmere find Pope Francis' candidness both refreshing and progressive.
And I think, too, that he has brought us to a point where we actually are thinking things that we never were told we could think about. And he's brought that to our attention, that we're allowed to just think about them.
The lifelong Catholics believe this pope is on the verge of making monumental modifications in Catholicism.
I think he knows that changes need to be made, and that's what I really like about him. And I think he's going to make these changes. I believe people are listening to him.
This pope is made an impression upon me. I think he's trying to change a lot of things, and I think he's reaching out to the poor, reaching out to the hungry, and trying to transform a lot of stuff.
To make sure they didn't miss out on this historic opportunity, the Wilmington residents all signed up to be volunteers for the World Meeting of Families.
We wanted to be a part of something that's so special that we know will never happen, maybe probably again in our lifetime.
The volunteers say the WMOF has been hands-on with guiding them through this process.
I just want to say that the committee, the volunteer committee, the volunteer people has been so organized.
They add security is a top concern among WMOF organizers.
We had to wait a few days to find out if our background checks cleared.
The volunteers will be on hand to help the more than 750,000 people who are expected to make their way to Philadelphia for the 2 days of events. The Pope will address the faithful on Saturday, September 26th at Independence Mall and hold a papal mass on Sunday, September 27th on the Benjamin Franklin Parkway. The weekend will also include inspirational events and exhibits held at the Pennsylvania Convention Center.
The booth is a big thing, and we're hoping to make up some of the expenses.
The sisters from the Caterina Benacasa Dominican Monastery in Newcastle will be among those hosting a booth at the Congress. Sister Mary Grace, who's an artist, will be raffling off 2 of her paintings.
I just decided to do several versions of the Pope, and so you'll see Pope Benedict and Pope Francis, and I love the one with the little boy crying his head off.
The sisters hope the booth will help bring more attention to their monastery's art gallery and gift shop that sits in the shadow of the Holy Spirit Parish Church.
There isn't much traffic. Some people say this is the best kept secret in Delaware.
While the sisters say getting everything together for the booth has been challenging, they're looking forward to the blessings they hope to receive from it.
It's just a big deal and a lot of expense. But so this is the kind of thing that we allow ourselves to do And we want to do it in order to spread the word of Dominican nuns, what we do.
In addition to the paintings, a coffee table book featuring other paintings by Sister Grace will also be on sale at their booth. All the proceeds will go to benefit the Sisters of the Caterina Benincasa Monastery. The visit of Pope Francis is also the cover story of Delaware Today this month. We've made that our content partner story, and we welcome Kevin Noonan, who wrote the article. Welcome.
Thanks for having me back. I appreciate it.
So I understand you met Bishop Francis Malooly of the Wilmington Diocese. First time meeting him. Can you tell me, I understand he's not going to Philadelphia to meet the Pope.
No, actually he'll meet him in Washington. They're having services in Washington also. I think that's where the Pope is going to meet a lot of the clergy there. Because obviously his time in Philadelphia, his schedule's pretty cramped, and I don't think he's going to have much time for that.
What was it like meeting?
Oh, he's just, he's a down-to-earth guy. He's obviously a man with a lot of responsibility, but he is, I think anyone who knows him or met him will say he's a man of the people. He's very down-to-earth and very easy to talk to.
So you also talked to him about his time as the head of the church. Is he retiring soon?
Well, he'll have to. By church canon law, you have to retire. I believe when you're 75, and I think he's 71. So he'll have to retire pretty soon, yes. Okay.
And I guess the sex abuse scandal will linger here and elsewhere for some time, but does Bishop Malooly think we've turned some type of corner?
He's very open about that in saying that it's very personal to certain people, and he understands that certain people who have been involved with this have not turned the corner and never will. I mean, they've been emotionally scarred for the rest of their lives, and he understands that, and he certainly has tried to make restitution in certainly spiritual ways, but the bishop is the first to say that he doesn't know if that's really enough. It's really up to the people who are involved to say that, not him.
Kevin Noonan of Delaware Today. Delaware Today is our NewsWorks content partner. You can read Kevin's story at delawaretoday.com. In just a few minutes, Katie Culinary of NewsWorks will be here with the things you need to know if you want to see the Pope in Philly.
This month, Congress is expected to vote on the Iran nuclear deal. Delaware Senator Tom Carper recently announced his support for the nuclear agreement. And this week, Senator Chris Coons made his position clear. Senator Coons, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you, Shirley.
You endorsed the deal in spite of its flaws, as you said in your announcement this week. And you also had some initial disappointment with the deal. So what changed to where you're now supporting it?
Well, first, I spent a lot of time studying and understanding the deal. It's very complex. It's very dense. It's 159 pages. There's all sorts of classified annexes. I sat through more than a dozen hearings on the Foreign Relations Committee and classified briefings before I felt like I really understood the good sides and the bad sides of this deal. For me, a critical turning point was meeting with the ambassadors from the United Kingdom, France, Germany, China, Russia, the other major countries that are signatories to this agreement, countries that have already ratified it. And they were very clear, both positively and negatively, about two things that mattered to me. First, that they are absolutely committed to enforcing the deal, even as their countries build stronger and better relationships with Iran. That's a real concern to me. Will they stand by us and rigorously enforce this deal, even as Iran tries to cheat, which I'm convinced they will? Second, that they would not go back to negotiations, that they didn't feel there was a better deal possible, and that they would resist reimposing sanctions. Those who advocate for voting against this deal, and there's many of them in Delaware, many personal friends of mine, believe it would be easy for us to reimpose sanctions and to go back and negotiate a better deal. I met with lots of folks who are seasoned enforcers of sanctions and were diplomats who negotiated this deal. And ultimately, regrettably, I was persuaded that that's not going to work. And so in a situation of choosing between two undesirable paths, I think the better path is to try diplomacy with our vital allies, do everything we can to strengthen this deal through deterrence and aggressive enforcement. And if we then end up having to use military force against Iran, we will have better intelligence, we will have the support of our allies because we tried diplomacy first.
Would you call this then the lesser of two evils?
Yes.
Okay. Is it unrealistic to think that there is this perfect deal out there that would? Okay.
I mean, I think it's clear. We had punishing effective multilateral sanctions in place against Iran for years now. And even in that environment, they have been steadily increasing the number of their centrifuges, steadily growing their uranium stockpile. They have 12 tons of enriched uranium right now. We couldn't bomb that away. They have hundreds of nuclear scientists who have mastered the production of uranium. We can't bomb that away.
So
in this deal, they give that up.
But how can we trust that they will hold up their end of the bargain?
We can't trust that they'll hold up their end of the bargain. We shouldn't trust that they'll hold up any. We should have inspectors on site 24/7 for all their nuclear facilities, which this deal provides. And we should invest even more in our intelligence capabilities and ensure that we've gotten firm commitments from our European allies that they too see a nuclear Iran as an existential threat and would back the use of force. I sent a letter to the president asking him 7 specific points where I had real concerns with this deal. And I did not get a final satisfactory to me letter until the day I announced my support. A whole series of conversations with the vice president, the Secretary of State, and the President that I made both while on a trip to Africa and from here in Delaware ultimately persuaded me the administration sees these risks clearly and will work with our allies to deal with them. But I think those of us in Congress also have a real responsibility over the years to come to enforce this deal aggressively, deeply distrusting Iran.
One of the U.S.'s allies, Israel, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, denounces the deal.
Yes.
You have the American-Israel Public Action Committee launching an aggressive media campaign against it. Did you speak to Israeli leaders about it? And did you speak to anyone in Israel who felt differently from Netanyahu?
Yes. So 3 things. I had a long conversation with the Israeli ambassador, Ron Dermer, who is an aggressive and very capable advocate for the Prime Minister's views. I had some very painful and heartfelt conversations directly with friends in Israel this past week, friends I've known a long time and who've been great supporters and partners. I got to know them working at a nonprofit in education many years ago, and they're wonderful people. And they were hugely upset at the idea that I could possibly support this deal. They're very opposed to it. I also heard from Israelis by Facebook, email, Twitter, who I know from other work together that supported the deal. There was also a campaign to bring former security and military leaders. There was a former Israeli admiral who was here who met with folks in my office and spoke to the community here in support of the deal, former heads of Mossad and Shin Bet. There's been a whole campaign to have U.S. military and intelligence leaders, former members of Congress, folks who are nuclear proliferation specialists to speak in favor of the deal, as well as Israeli security leaders. And there's been a comparable mirror campaign to get folks from all those different backgrounds to speak against the deal. At the end of the day, the insight that mattered, the input that mattered the most to me was not a TV ad campaign, was not the sort of national partisanship around this. It was Delawareans who've invested a great deal of time in calling my office and meeting with me and helping me understand their views. I think this is a close call. Those who suggest that this is easy, that this deal is either just out of hand awful or obviously good, either haven't read it or aren't clear about the consequences and how untrustworthy Iran is. I think
it's easy to armchair quarterback.
I think it's very easy to critique this one way or the other. If you really delve into the details, it is difficult. This is the least bad path forward that does give us more intelligence. They give up their uranium stockpile. They give up their plutonium pathway. And for 15 years, they give up their uranium enrichment pathway. But Iran will try to do very bad things with the money they get from sanctions relief. We have to be diligent in stopping them. And after 15 years, we have a big challenge in their very large uranium enrichment program.
All right, Senator Coons, thank you. We're going to wrap up. Great having you here, and thanks again for your time here on First. Continuing coverage of the Iran nuclear deal can be found online at newsworks.org.
Coming up on First, what do you need to know about getting around Philadelphia during the Pope's visit? We have answers to your frequently asked questions, courtesy of newsworks.org. And the Delaware Watercolor Society is more than just a pretty painting, it's our first experience.
Monday night, WHYY and PBS will rebroadcast the landmark Civil War series from Ken Burns. His documentary work is credited with casting that time in American history in a different light. This week, we shine that light on Delaware and its role in the Civil War. When you ask for a description of Delaware during the Civil War, you get a variety of reactions.
The loyal opposition.
I would say forced.
The explanations go a long way in describing what was happening in the first state during the 1860s.
Delaware was one of 4 slave states to have remained in the Union during the war between the states.
Everyone likes to say Delaware's a Yankee state, a northern state. Delaware was one of the 15 southern states.
There are strong symbols representing both the North and the South in Delaware during the Civil War. Wilmington was the last stop on the Underground Railroad. We met University of Delaware professor Jonathan Russ at the burial site of Thomas Garrett. Garrett is one of the most famous symbols of the push to get slaves to the North to freedom. Russ spoke of the attitudes in Delaware at the time.
Newcastle County in particular was overwhelmingly industrial and focused primarily toward Philadelphia, oriented both politically, culturally, and socially.
They were motivated by being self-governed. In other words, they probably believed in states' rights.
Just outside of Georgetown in Sussex County, a monument to those willing to fight for the South. The monument has been there since 2007. Jeff Plummer is with the Confederate Grays Camp 468 and a descendant of ancestors who fought for the South. There were over 2,000 Delawareans who had a connection to the South.
When the war began, they actually were forming militias down here in the southern part of the state to serve the South.
One of the more enduring symbols of the war is Fort Delaware. Originally built to defend Wilmington and Philadelphia, it became a prison camp for captured Confederates.
Fort Delaware is unique in Civil War prisons in that we held not only officers but regular enlisted men, ordinary civilians, and federal convicts.
Fort Delaware is open to visitors and gives a glimpse of what life was like there in the 1860s. Its population was over 11,000 after the Battle of Gettysburg.
You can imagine ships pulling up with thousands of prisoners per day. It was very overwhelming to the staff here.
Thousands died. There was no place to bury them at the fort, so they were moved just across the river from Fort Delaware to New Jersey. Now the Confederate dead there have their own section of a federal veterans cemetery at Finn Point, located next to Fort Mott State Park in the Garden State.
Prison conditions were extraordinarily difficult. Thousands of prisoners ultimately perished at Fort Delaware due to disease and due to unsanitary living conditions.
Our goal is to show number one, the diversity of the war when you take African Americans.
Willis Phelps portrays a variety of people at Fort Delaware. He helps tell the story of 19 black soldiers who were captured at Gettysburg.
They were skilled men, highly skilled, who made needful, useful things.
Phelps' other passion is the story of Polktown. It's next to Delaware City and the home of free blacks. His group is learning their story through the excavation of a cemetery.
A place like Polktown was a sanctuary. Delaware being a slave state, they call it a border state, which is a nice name for a slave state.
The Delaware connection to the war was intense. It was a reflection of one of the most turbulent times in our nation's history.
This is a civil war. This is a country torn apart, and that Americans north and south perished.
Another University of Delaware professor has joined up with the Polktown group as they look to expand their efforts in the years ahead. The Ken Burns Civil War series begins Monday from 9 to 11 p.m. on WHYY-TV. Tuesday through Friday, it airs from 9 to 11:30.
We devoted the top of our show this week to the meaning of the papal visit to people in Delaware. But what if you actually want to attend any of the papal events? Well, we invited Katie Culinary, who's one of the many Newsworks.org reporters covering the Pope preps. Hi there, Katie.
Hey, Shirley.
You have a list of questions and answers online, but let's go through some of them.
Sure.
First of all, why is Pope Francis coming to Philadelphia?
So he's coming to Philadelphia for the World Meeting of Families. It's a conference put on by the Vatican every 3 years that centers on this idea that the family and traditional Catholic family values are inherently beneficial to society.
And then why did the Vatican choose Philadelphia specifically?
Well, we don't know exactly for sure. Philadelphia didn't apply for this. The Vatican just called up the Archdiocese one day and said that Philadelphia had been selected, but sources tell me that it was possibly to get the Archdiocese some good press after years of bad news about clergy sex abuse and church and school closings.
Where's the best place to see Pope Francis when he comes, and will people even get a glimpse of him?
Well, I've talked to a lot of Philadelphians who remember when Pope John Paul II came back in 1979, and they say if you even blinked once, you'd just totally miss him. He just whizzed right by. But Pope Francis is known for really loving people and being among them and reaching out and touching them. So he's got a schedule that's jam-packed, and it includes 3 major public outdoor events. So you'll be able to get a glimpse of him. That includes a speech and a huge outdoor festival on Saturday, and then the climax of the visit will be when Pope Francis will celebrate Mass on the Benjamin Franklin Parkway in front of the Art Museum at 4 o'clock on Sunday. And about 1 to 2 million people are expected to attend that Mass.
So clearly that's expected to be the big marquee event.
Right, that's really going to be the climax.
Okay. I think among the most asked of the questions in your frequently asked questions section, it's how will you get around the city?
Right.
So what is the best way?
Really, the easiest way, if you're thinking of coming into Philadelphia for Pope weekend, is to use public transportation. You won't be able to drive your car anywhere near the events, and it'll probably be hard to find parking even farther away. So in order to do that, you'll need one of SEPTA's special one-day papal rail passes. They're $10 each. Been told that there's about 200,000 left, so plenty to go around. Right now, they're only being sold brick and mortar style at certain designated stations. There are none available, unfortunately, at the Wilmington station. However, you can pick up passes over on the Pennsylvania side at Marcus Hook,
which is very close, so it's not too inconvenient. And if you need multiple tickets, then how do you go about doing that?
You can email SEPTA at papalbulkpasses@septa.org.
What about getting around on the day of the visit?
If you're coming from Delaware, you'll want to get somebody, and make sure it's a really good friend because you're going to owe them big time, to drop you off at the station you'll be departing from, because parking is going to be really limited at a lot of these stations. As I'm sure you know, there's going to be road closures around the Wilmington station to accommodate for all this traffic.
Yeah, Wilmington officials had put out a traffic advisory saying to expect heavy traffic volume in the area, but the major roads, we don't have to worry about that.
Right.
Correct?
There's going to be a lot of major highway closures around Philadelphia, including stretches of the Schuylkill Expressway, the Vine Street Expressway, and City Line Avenue. But I-95, we've been assured, will be open with the exception of certain on and off ramps.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, Katie. Now, the World Meeting of Families runs from Tuesday, September 22nd. Remind me of those dates exactly.
The World Meeting of Families runs Tuesday, September 22nd through Friday, September 25th at the Pennsylvania Convention Center in Center City. And Pope Francis arrives Saturday morning, September 26th, and he'll be here. He flies out of town on Sunday evening, September 27th.
Okay. Well, you can follow Katie on Twitter at Katie Culinary, and you can check out all of the work done in advance of the papal visit at newsworks.org/Pope in Philly. WHYY-FM will have special coverage of the papal visit, including the Mass on Sunday, September 27th. Thank you so much, Katie.
Thank you, Shirley.
One more papal item to share. If you want to see Pope Francis up close, then you'll need tickets. Anywhere from 20th and the Parkway to Aikens Oval is now reserved for ticket holders. Your local parish throughout the region is the place to get them. Check out newsworks.org to learn more.
Just tuning in? Go online to WHYY.org/first to catch up on the rest of this show. Past shows are there too. Our e-newsletter is a great way to find out what WHYY is doing in Delaware.
In 2004, a group of like-minded artists got together to paint, teach, and learn from each other. They became the Delaware Watercolor Society. They've grown to over 100 members across 3 states. Their jury-membered show is now taking place at the Biggs Museum. That's where we head this week for our first experience.
Delaware Watercolor Society started in 2004 with 5 people who got together and wanted to paint. And it has since grown. We're now in our 11th year. In this particular show, we received 106 paintings. 72 were selected for entry into the show. Most people will say it's the hardest medium to work with. Watercolor acts on its own and does things that are unexpected and fabulous. And it does generate a great deal of interest as you go from painting to painting to look at the various ways it's handled by each of the artists. Trying to do something that's thematic takes away some of the creativity. You're working towards something, you're not working for what you want. The subject matter is always theirs to produce, and that generates a much broader scope of subjects within the show, and that's more interesting for the viewing public. This is thrilling. We have been at the Bigs probably 4 or 5 times now, and the shows get better and better as far as we're concerned as the organization grows and as our artists gain more and more skill. I want people to really love this show, and by all means to contact us if they have interest. For the individual artists, it's important to be here and to be seen. This is another way that DWS has the ability to present itself to the public. I hope that it generates for some people an interest in exploring the organization and seeing what we're all about. I hope that they have a new appreciation for what can be accomplished with watercolor. When you see a good watercolor, they're breathtaking. That's all there is to it.
The first place blue ribbon you see there was won by Elizabeth Forsyth. Her work is called Chilling Out in January. If you want to learn more about Delaware Watercolor Society events, you can find them at Delaware Watercolor Society.org. The Biggs Museum display is available until September 20th. Find them at biggsmuseum.org.
And next week on First, we focus on the issue of teacher compensation. Can teachers earn more money without having to leave the classroom and become a school principal? And don't forget to read our story online now at newsworks.org/Delaware on the Smarter Balanced test results.
And we can't say goodbye this week without officially welcoming Shirley Min back from maternity leave. So how is the baby?
Tilly is doing great, and I got a sleeper, so good news.
Yeah, congratulations for sure on that. Well, we are glad to have you back, and we thank you at home for watching too. For Nichelle Polston and Shirley Min, I'm Mark Eichman. Have a great week.